On January 20, 1969, a family of 6, Carol 44, Joni 41, Alex 17, Michael 15, and the twins Jake and January 13 years old, were traveling in Nevada between Elko and Battle Mountain when they got caught in a terrible storm. That night in the desert, something really scary happened. 2 employees found something strange and unsettling the following day. 10 years later, during an interview with a journalist, Jake told his story. "I'll never forget the song by Jim Morrison that was on the radio as we were traveling down that desolate stretch of road. There's killer on the road, his mind is strange like a toad," the lyric said. "We left Salt Lake City around 3 p.m., heading to Reno to see our cousins for Thanksgiving. We planned to stay at a hotel on the way. I remember Dad saying, 'Hey guys, we're in Nevada. There's nothing here but sagebrush.' He was right. I looked out and saw that was pretty much all around us. We had about 6 more hours to drive, and it was starting to get dark. I dozed off and woke up to Mom saying, 'Carol, it's raining heavily. Will we be okay?' 'Yeah, we'll manage. I might have to slow down, but I've driven in storms like this before,' Dad replied. Looking out through the windshield from the back seat, I saw the rain pouring down. Even with the wipers on high, it was tough to see. I started feeling nervous. Dad drove for about 20 more minutes before saying, 'This is getting worse. I'll stop for a bit to wait it out. We'll find the next hotel and call it a day.' He took the next exit off the highway. Sometimes, these exits in the desert lead to dirt roads or nothing at all. Later, I learned that this part of Nevada had many old mines, some from over 100 years ago. As Dad maneuvered the car into a parking spot, he said, 'Let's stop here for a bit. I'll take a quick nap, and hopefully, the storm will ease up.' We all settled in and gradually dozed off amidst the quietness of the car. Abruptly, I awoke to the sound of Dad attempting to start the car again. But it stubbornly refused to respond. 'What's happening?' Carol asked Mom. 'I'm not sure. It won't start, feels like the battery's dead,' Dad explained. He raised the hood to inspect. The storm had nearly subsided, leaving only a light drizzle. When Dad returned, he sighed, 'Can't find any issue. Nothing's loose.' Mom inquired, 'What's our next move?' 'I'll walk to the highway and try to flag down help. Hopefully, it's not too far,' Dad decided. 'Is that safe?' Mom fretted. 'We don't have many options. It's getting colder.' 'Lock the doors, I'll be back soon,' Dad assured before stepping out into the dimming light. While my siblings continued their slumber, Mom and I sat tensely, feeling the chill seep in, our breath fogging the windows. Suddenly, a loud thud against the car startled us. 'Stay inside,' Dad's voice rang out. Then, muffled sounds and an eerie silence followed. 'Carol. What's happening?' Mom's voice quivered with panic. I called out for Dad, my siblings wide awake, equally concerned and bewildered. 'Mom, where's Dad?' one of them urgently asked. 'I don't know.' Together, we clung together inside the car, enveloped in uncertainty, unaware of Dad's whereabouts or what awaited us in the looming darkness of the desert. He went to get help because the car won't start. After a short while, the car was hit by something, and I heard my father yelling for us to remain inside. He sounded as though he was having a fight. Then it abruptly stopped. I answered. A few minutes later, something tore off the car door, and we took off running. Michael said, 'I don't want to go back down there, but we need to find Mom and Alex.' 'Not me either.' 'I'm positive it was Alex who screamed from the base of the hill,' I exclaimed. Michael said, 'Let's start walking down the highway and hope a car comes along soon.' I gave him a nod of the head and followed him. There was still a light rain coming down, and my clothes were wet. I wasn't shivering yet because I'd been running, but I could feel the cold starting to set in. After a while, Michael stopped in his tracks and there were no cars passing on either side of the highway. He remained motionless for a while, appearing stunned. "Michael, how are you doing?" I inquired. After he remained silent, I shook him, put my hand on his shoulder, and repeated, "Michael, are you okay?" At last, he said, "We need to get off the road and find somewhere to stay for the night." "Why? What topic are you discussing?" "We simply need a car to drop by," I uttered. He turned and started walking off the highway into the desert without even looking at me or saying anything. "Jan. Look at me." "Jake, what do we do?" "I don't want to be out here alone," said January. Though I knew we should keep walking and stay on the road, I couldn't decide whether to follow Michael or do what was right. "All right, let's go with Michael," I answered. I hope he knows what he's doing, but I'm not sure what he's doing. Following him, we staggered along the soft, damp dirt that covered the desert floor. He never looked back or said anything as he went. He appeared to be in a trance of sorts. He was also moving pretty quickly, making it occasionally difficult for Jan and me to keep up. Still, it seemed that keeping going as we were kept us warm, so that was a good thing. Fortunately, it had stopped raining and the clouds were beginning to part, allowing the stars to shine through and improving visibility in the dark. We reached the top of a small hill overlooking a valley, and I would have guessed that we had walked for several miles. The sky was clear now, and I could make out what appeared to be a few old houses in the distance. Since I couldn't see any roads and no lights were on, I figured the houses were old and deserted. At the top of the hill, Michael appeared to pause for a moment before continuing on his trance-like stroll in the direction of the houses. "Michael, wait. Why are you going there?" I asked. He kept moving away from Jan and me, and I never heard back from him. "Jan, hurry up. We must stay ahead," I remarked. Jan simply nodded her head without saying anything. I could see she was tired and cold because she had her arms wrapped around herself. But at that precise moment, I recall feeling appreciative. When we jumped out of the car, we were still wearing our shoes. I noticed Michael was getting close as we kept moving in the direction of the houses. When I got within a stone's throw away from the first house, I caught some sudden movement out of the corner of my eye. This made me immediately stop, and Jan, who was behind me, walked into the back of me, saying, "Hey, why'd you stop?" I said, pointing to the left of the first house. "I saw something moving over there." With fear in her voice, she questioned, "What did you see?" I answered, "I'm not sure, but it wasn't Michael." When I realized Michael was nowhere to be found, I began searching around for him, and a wave of intense fear overcame me as if I had been struck by a baseball bat. "Michael. Where are you, Michael?" Not too loudly, but out loud, I said. Moments passed with no reply. "Jake, I'm afraid," Jan said. "Yes, I agree," I said, keeping my feet firmly planted on the arid ground. I was about to call out to Michael again when I saw something dark about the size of a man, but it was not built like a man. 50 yards in front of us, running from one house to the one next to it, I nearly let out a scream as I staggered back into January. "Were you present when that occurred?" I questioned Jan, my voice quivering. "Observe what?" "Jake, you're terrifying me," Jan retorted. Pointing to the spot where I saw the object running, I remarked, "Something big ran from that house to that one over there." We stood there, terrified beyond belief, discussing our options when Michael let out the most horrifying scream. We remained silent throughout. Never in my life have I heard him scream like that, and I will always remember it. The dark thing ran towards the house, and we heard a thrashing noise from inside. Jan began sobbing, seized my arm, and gave me a firm squeeze before asking, "Jake, was that Michael?" I'm incredibly afraid. Although my body was telling me to run, my mind was not listening. The thrashing sound abruptly stopped. At that moment, I managed to move my body and loudly whispered to Jan, "We have to run. We must now leave this place." "Where should we go?" she inquired. "Swivel around and return the direction we came." "We need to hurry," I replied. I started to back away, but Jan wouldn't budge, so I took her by the arm and began dragging her with me. After a while she regained consciousness and turned around to walk with me as quickly as we could away from the houses. We soon found ourselves running through the dense sagebrush instead of just walking. I couldn't stop watching my back to make sure the dark creature wasn't following us. We paused when we reached the other side of the hill where we had previously stood because we were out of breath. Jan looked at me and then back at me, crying. Though I wanted to cry, I could not. All that had happened to me in the last few hours seemed unreal, and I was in a state of shock. I saw movement on the hill's horizon just as I was about to tell Jan that we should keep going. It was standing atop the hill and staring down at us, as far as I could tell. I was about 5 feet 5 inches at the time, and the sagebrush we had been running through reached almost my shoulders. This thing appeared to be about the same height as me, but it had a much wider build. Its head's shape against the skyline was also incredibly strange. It can't be a man, whatever it is, I thought. I took hold of Jan's arm and urged her to look up at the object atop the hill. "We must now flee." She gave a little shriek when she saw it too, looking up. We turned and ran again, very quickly. Not that I knew which way to turn. My knees were trembling from fear, which made it difficult for me to run and nearly led to several falls. I wasn't even interested in checking to see if the thing was behind us at this point. I just concentrated on moving quickly through the dense sagebrush. While I ran, I also made sure I could hear Jan behind me. Suddenly, without warning, I tripped over something and started tumbling down a deep, dark hole. As I tumbled through the darkness, time seemed to slow down, and the thought, "This is how I'm going to die," went through my mind as clear as day. When I finally stopped, I landed on my back and could see Jan was on her way down as well. A few seconds later, she landed on top of me, which hurt like hell. She lay there not moving or saying anything. I assumed she was unconscious. As I looked up through the darkness, I could see the stars clearly in the sky. The hole we'd fallen in appeared to be square-shaped at the top. A few minutes went by when suddenly, the dark thing that had been chasing us appeared at the top of the hole, looking down at us. It was easy to make out its outline against the stars. I started shaking Jan, saying, "Wake up, Jan, wake up. It's right there, looking down at us. Get up." No matter how hard I shook her or yelled at her, she would not wake up. Her body was lifeless like the doll she used to play with when she was younger. For what seemed like hours, the dark thing just stood there, not moving an inch. The dark thing turned quickly, disappearing as if it had never been, as the sky began to turn color, indicating that sunrise was not too far off. I was immobile as I lay in that hole, watching the night give way to day, Jan's lifeless body still resting atop me. I knew Jan was dead, so I was finally able to cry while holding her. I repeatedly told myself out loud as I lay there that this is how I was going to die because her body was beginning to get cold and had rigor mortis. This is how my death will transpire. When the sound of laughter and men conversing woke me up, I wasn't quite sure how long I'd been out. I initially believed that I might have struck my head too hard, but then I noticed movement above me. With the last of my remaining strength, I cried out, "Help me, help me." Suddenly, I saw the head of a man appear over the hole and he said, "Holy, come on over here." Above the hole, another man materialized. They then conversed with one another. Then, I figured, one of them dashed off to get help. "Hey, how are you doing?" inquired the lone man. Tears were streaming down my face as I replied, "I need help, my sister is dead." "Don't worry, Max has left to get assistance." The man, who I later learned was Brent Wiscombe, said, "You hang in there and don't move, we'll get you out." A few hours later, the sheriff's department found the hole and was able to save Jay and get Jan's body out. Jake sustained numerous cuts and fractures. A broken neck from falling into the hole was listed as the cause of death when Jan's body was sent to a coroner. That very day, Max and Brent, who worked for a mining company, were assigned to erect a fence around the abandoned mine shaft in order to stop exactly this kind of thing from occurring. The other family members were the subject of an organized search party, but their remains were never found. All that was left of their car was bloodied, torn clothing. As Jake had said, they located the old abandoned house and found parts of Michael's clothing inside. Jake was sent to live with his uncle and cousins in Reno after spending several days with the sheriff's department, and he stayed there until his death. Jake's answer to questions about the dark thing was always the same: evil. For more horror stories, please subscribe.